Thanks for the introduction. I'm quite delighted to be a part of this Embedded Vision Summit 2021. So our topic of discussion today will be deep neural networks, training data, how to know what exactly you need and how to get it. So we all know that convolutional neural networks have been a phenomenal success when it comes to computer vision tasks. However, these networks are quite reliant on big data. Now, for domains like medical imagery or industrial setup like production houses, big data is a huge challenge. So how do we really address the problem of data scarcity? How do we basically understand that overfitting may be something where all our effort might really go down the drain? So data augmentation comes for rescue. Data augmentation, it primarily encompasses a suite of techniques which enhance the size and quality of training data set, such that better deep learning models can be built using them. So convolutional neural networks typically downsample the spatial resolution of images while expanding the depth of their feature maps. Data augmentation is a very powerful method of achieving low validation error with low training error. So there are functional solutions such as dropout regularization, batch normalization, transfer learning, which can be used to have a specific model learn on smaller data set. But here we'll focus more on data augmentation and the theory of learnability. So what exactly are we going to cover? So we're going to cover empirical risk minimization, probably approximately correct, the problem of paucity, where we'll basically discuss around choice of algorithms based on the problem context, transfer learning, your open data sets, how to access, where to really get your open data sets from different sites. Then we'll basically touch upon data augmentation for image and video data, text data and speech data, and GANs for data augmentation. How exactly can you leverage generative adversarial networks? Then we discuss upon problem of plenty, where constrained resources, which are basically running on low memory, low storage, how exactly to basically make your algorithms deploy deploy your algorithms on these constrained resources. What exactly are the techniques to obviate or overcome constrained resources? Then we touch upon case studies, conclusion, and future work. So what is empirical risk minimization? So risk is primarily the fact that we don't really know the true distribution of data on which an algorithm will work when it is in its inference phase. So we may have trained our algorithm on a specific set of data for which we know what exactly is the data distribution. But in inference, we won't really know that what kind of data we might really encounter, the algorithm will encounter. Empirical, we call it empirical because we measure performance of an algorithm on training data in training phase only. Minimization is primarily choice of hypothesis, which minimizes the risk which we call as not really knowing the true distribution of data in inference phase. So minimization is basically minimization of this risk. So what exactly do we need to do? What is the approach we need to take? Understand the problem context, devise a solution as applicable to the problem context. So do you have a choice between classical learning, deep learning? Then you don't really repeat yourself. Do not repeat yourself principle. Code and data, there's plenty and plethora of websites, GitHub, repositories, medical, hospitals, your universities, many places you'll basically find your data sets readily available for research and development purpose, even for that matter, practical purposes. Then it is about perpetual learning. For example, Bayesian algorithms may really work very well on low volume of data. But as you go on increasing and your data volumes, you go on collecting more and more data. So your algorithms should be hot swapped, right? So the learning process is pretty much perpetual and is a function of the problem context in which one is in. So what is probably approximately correct? It is a kind of specialization of your empirical risk minimization. As we discussed, ERM comes with an implicit assumption that the hypothesis exists in the space with error less than a specific quantity, which we call as epsilon. Agnostic PSE learning is basically based on the fact that it is going to learn the best labeling function by making no assumption about the data labels distribution. The accuracy, which we basically call like this accuracy, which we call as like epsilon, logically controls the necessary sample size. Since the higher accuracy we have, logically we need to have a training set to be more faithful sample from the domain. Therefore, increasing the number of samples necessary to achieve such an accuracy is a mandatory thing. So here, what you see in this formula, you have the M, which is a sample size, which is basically dependent on your H, which is subset of hypothesis. H is basically approximately correct if it is bounded by an error over distribution of data. And correctness is basically the probability of learning that learning algorithm will basically output such a classifier. Now, in essence, what that means is how much data you need is a function of how much accuracy you want your algorithm to basically abide to. What are the accuracy targets for yourself, right? So that is implicitly a function of the amount of data which you need. Occam's razor principle is something where you compare two models with similar kind of like complexity and similar predictions. We should always be choosing the simpler model. Finding a deep learning model to perform well is an exciting thing, but like there might be other less complex models where you might really have to do some kind of like trade-off, but still they achieve your business objectives. So what we basically propose is one, choose the right algorithm, leverage transfer learning, and wherever appropriate, figure out if there is an open data set which is readily available for you. So classical and deep learning are pretty different in the way classical learning has been into industry. It has been like used by industry since last like 40, 50 years. So you have basically image processing algorithms like SIFT, HOG, SURF, right? So these are algorithms which basically figure out gradients in an image, edges, corners in an image, right? So that kind of like thing can be appropriately done in a context where you don't really have high quantity of labeled data set. If you have high quantity of labeled data set, if you have appropriate resources to crunch the numbers to process these images, then deep learning could be the better way. Could be, depending on, again, like the business context is a prime and most important thing. So classical algorithms will require your manual feature extraction. They will require like your deployment, like deployment is quite an ease with classical algorithms. Accuracy wise, your deep learning algorithms score well because at the cost of like your resources, your high compute throughput, right? Throughput in terms of like the data which is being crunched by the network. So deep learning models with right kind of like tools and techniques will tend to be more accurate. But then there are situations like where due to some such statutory requirements, you might really have to have some kind of understanding, explainable AI. I mean, understanding or interpretable models. That is where basically your classical algorithms score well. So the takeaway is that be specific about business problem and apply an appropriate solution which is in line with what exactly is required. Now, transfer learning is something like where you have sufficiently labeled data, right? You train your algorithms in this specific target domain where you have good amount of data, and then basically apply the model, its weights, its network architecture to your target domain, right? So what that really means is, in case if you have inspection problem or paint inspection which needs to be done or like sorted by computer vision, and you basically apply, you train your model on thousands of images in an automobile factory. Same model can be used for appliances also. It can be used in aerospace also for paint inspection with similar kind of like conditions. So as far as feature spaces is concerned, you may really have like different feature space and label space, or you may have similar feature space and label space. Depending on the same, transfer learning will work really well in both your heterogeneous and homogeneous kind of contexts. So there are different approaches towards like transfer learning. You can have instance-based approach, where there is a good amount of overlapping as far as features are concerned between source and target domains. But the domains are different, right? So it cannot really be used directly, but definitely, as I said, like, so you have automotive and aerospace where you can basically transfer your models from one domain to other domain. Then you have feature-based like approach. Feature-based basically corresponds to a subspace spanned by the features in the source and target domains. So good feature representation for both source and target domains enables projecting data from one domain or one representation into other representation. Model-based approach basically takes an assumption that the models in source domain have captured a general structure of knowledge, which can be applied to target domain. Both domains share same parameters and have parameters for training or learning. Model relation is quite different than like these three approaches, as it has no implicit assumption for the data to be independent or identically distributed. But it definitely relies on the fact that the rules specifying the relationships between the entities, those rules are being captured properly in the source domain. And same can be transferred to the target domain. So how exactly your entities are related? So there are different methodologies which can be used for deploying your transfer learning in DNNs, deep neural networks. You can have your lower layers fixed because lower level layers will identify your abstracted like generalized features. As you move up the hierarchy, like in the later layers of the network, it is more towards like specialization. So keep your lower level fixed and optimize the parameters for higher layers. Or you may really basically remove your last n layers of the network where your problem, the function has to learn very specifically to your problem area. So this is about like transfer learning. Moving on to open data sets. We have data set research like Google has recently launched. It's been like, I believe, a couple of years. Then you have Kaggle datasets, you have GitHubs, and you have many public repositories where you can find like data pertaining to smart cities, factory, IoT, medical imaging, MRIs, brain scans, your lungs X-ray. All that data is readily available on many of the public repositories. So now we basically come to problem of paucity. So paucity, we have discussed around approaches like where we see that like you can make things simple but not simpler. So there are techniques to deal with like data augmentation in a programmatic way, rather than relying on open data set or like your transfer learning. These approaches are not really mutually exclusive. Let me basically clarify this thing at the onset. You can have a hybrid approach, but like when it comes to data augmentation, you have three different like kinds of unstructured data which you have to deal with. Our focus will be on image and video data, but we'll touch upon text and audio data also, like what are the different approaches and libraries to achieve data augmentation in text and audio. So the problem of paucity in image and video data, primarily your approaches fall into two basic categories. First category is your warp techniques. Warp techniques primarily will preserve the labeling of your images more often than not, right? Whether you're using kernel filters, color space transformation, you may really randomly erase a specific part of an image, transform it into a new image, right? Image mixing can be done where your two images are being fused, right? And then you have like common techniques of geometric transformation in terms of your noise injection, translation, rotation, flipping, and all. Then you have yet neural network-based techniques, which are adversarial training, neural style transfer, and GAN data augmentation. Meta learning is something like where the learning policies are being established. Like what is the best way of basically data augmentation? So learning policy is being established based on learning about learning, the best way of learning, right? How exactly to figure out what is the best way of learning a specific technique to augment your data. So neural augmentation neural augmentation, auto augmentation, and smart augmentation are three sorts of meta learning, which is basically combination of your image mixing, your geometric transformation, neural style transform, and all. So what exactly should be your considerations when you're talking about like your data augmentation? So for example, if you have a image, if you have an image, right? So you have an image of 9, and if you basically do an augmentation and you convert, like you flip it by say 180 degrees, and it becomes a 6. So the label is not really preserved by this geometric transformation. So is it like what you want to do? Or basically, this is something which may really make your function not really learn the way it should. The function approximation might really go for a toss. So the point is, like, the context is that, like, invariance, whether it is translation, scale, or color, these things must be very well understood, right? Must be very well understood that whether I need, like, what kind of invariance my function needs to basically be learning. It must really be an idempotent, like, so it should not really have any bearing on any sort of invariation, whether it is illumination, color perturbation, scale invariance. And accordingly, you can plan your strategy for your data augmentation. Then you have like your label, I mean, preserving. So this is also, GANs is also something like where you can preserve your labels. But these categories or these like methodologies fall into your deep neural networks kind of like data augmentation technique. So GANs are primarily based on like game theory, min-max game between two networks, where one network is trying to generate synthetic data with some random noise, and the other network, which is called a discriminator network, is trying to discriminate between real data and generator synthetic data. The generator, when it generates its data, it will figure out the amount of error which the discriminator has called out, and will accordingly adjust the weights, and will again generate the images, adjust the noise, right, the weights to generate this image. And then basically the discriminator will again tell. So it's a kind of competing environment, right? So it's a competing environment kind of thing. So applicable to transfer learning or few shot learning use cases for data augmentation, we have GANs where we need to include class information in our GAN model. So there are three types of conditional GANs, right, where class information is fed for generator. You have auxiliary classifier GANs, where your discriminator performs a classification and discriminates between real and synthetic data. Loss function is basically your cross entropy, binary cross entropy, for classification to incentivize the generator and to learn the representative class samples in addition to the learning to generate samples, right? Now it is a kind of like multitask learning, because two networks, your generator and your discriminator, they are both competing and cooperating. They're competing whether the image is real or fake, and they're cooperating in basically classifying the image correctly. So you have your auxiliary classifier GANs. You have your data augmentation GANs, which learn how to generate a synthetic image using a lower dimensional representation of a real image. So the moment like lower dimensional, basically compacting your higher dimensions into lower dimension comes into picture, it's about encoding and decoding. So you have variational autoencoders being used along with your generator and discriminator networks. So that's the idea. Autoencoder takes an existing image, encodes it, adds noise, and the decoder decodes it. The decoder learns a large family of transformations for data augmentation. You have balancing GANs, which is again an autoencoder, but the way it is basically different than your AC GAN or like your data GANs, right? Data augmentation GANs. So the way it is different is basically the image is basically passed on to a conditional latent vector, which is a generator. So it basically balances out the amount of like data which is generated, like the amount of like the data which is basically there, right? And the amount of synthetic data which is being created, right? So it takes an approach where each class samples can be taken from multiple distributions rather than just one distribution. And it is basically passed on to the generator network. Then you have like different approaches in terms of your audio, text, and time series data, right? And different libraries are there. You have noise injection for audio. You can basically do range compression, simple gain, equalization, and you can use libraries like Librosa, audio minutations, right? You have like text data augmentation, where you can basically use your thesaurus, contextualize like back translation, text generation, and you have NLP org and other kind of libraries like which can be used for text augmentation. Similarly, for time series, you have cropping, warping, flipping. I mean, these are very intuitive terms, right? And you have libraries like TSOG, which can be used for your time series data augmentation. Now we come to basically problem of plenty. So for scenarios where you have constrained resources like embedded cameras, security cameras, embedded devices, and your inference engine needs to be embedded onto these processors on like constrained memory, you have to take an approach where both your hardware and your algorithm, right? So these things are tightly coupled, and the approach has to be such that like your algorithms can run on these kind of constrained devices. So whether it is your computational gating, your fixed point processing, distributed architecture, spatial data reuse. So these kind of, techniques and methodologies you should be using to address computational and memory bottlenecks. So I have a paper in my reference slide, so which can refer to go deep into these specific terminologies. So what we'll discuss over here primarily is data path optimization. Very simple terms, like you can basically optimize the bandwidth usage of your input layer or your weight layer or your output layer, making that specific layer and the data in that layer as stationary. So for input layer, you may really want to basically make your input data stationary with several weights, and output layer basically as a variable, with which it gets multiplied. Similarly, and you are what exactly are we doing? So what we are doing by making a layer stationary is we are optimizing in that specific layer multiply and accumulate operation, which is at the core of your deep neural network processing whenever it is processing an image. We are also basically optimizing the weights and the values which are fetched only once, because they're stationary. There need not really be multiple fetch from the memory to your processor, right? So no unnecessary usage of L2 cache, L1 cache and all. So primarily the idea is to basically make a specific layer as stationary. Similarly, approximate computing can be used, like where you can reduce your precision from a specific data point or like data type to a more restrictive and like a data type which basically is more like I would say like less rather resource intensive, right? So int will be a less resource intensive thing than a float, depending on the context. But then within float also, you can basically bring your 32-bit like floating point to a lower fixed point precision. So in a specific application, binary weight version of ImageNet is only 2.9% less accurate as far as top one measure is concerned for classification than the full precision LXNet. So 2.9%, if you can live with that, you must really go for approximate computing. Optimized hierarchical cascading processing is basically about like a hierarchy, which will basically classify your negative samples right at the inception or like in the lower layers of the network. Right. So for example, acoustic noise, background images on each stage, right? Only a few layers of network are executed. Classifiers are run unless a specific probability is basically obtained. So that is around optimized hierarchical cascading processing. We cover a few use cases over here, manufacturing use cases where we had like this fuel tank. So this fuel tank like had like 4 main categories of defects. We had no images, no videos of this particular data. And we had to set up a sample rig in the test, right? With cameras to take pictures with various like illumination, variations as close as production. So the idea was primarily to have a simulated environment rather than really going like via data augmentation technique, because we didn't really had any data with regard to, we just had the fuel tank, right? So idea was to replicate the production environment and basically use it for your data augmentation or creating data. Then we had this like CV-enabled medical device procedure validation, which was a plasma extractor machine, right? Equipment, where we had like 8 main categories of defects, right? So 8 main categories were related to your flap is really protruding, right? Your top loop is not really in the gear. Wires are basically overlapping, or they're basically causing some sort of like hindrance to proper functioning of the device, right? So the solution was to basically, we didn't really had any images, like no videos, no images. So we captured a few images, then basically did like applied TensorFlow data augmentation library for over like 98% of accuracy in inference in production. Right, so this was quite successful, and yes, we applied like TensorFlow augmentation in this one. Similarly, like we had like PCB defect detection, where like your mouse bite or like say short or spur or spurious copper with a for a specific PC board, like so that we were supposed to identify almost 8 to 9 defects, right, on this PCB board, right, and we had barely 5 to 6 images per defect. Now, as a general rule, what is being propounded in image processing is number of features times 10 or 10 times number of features of a specific image should be the amount of data which you should really have for a algorithm to learn. So here we use like Keras based classification with 97% accuracy, and we were able to successfully execute the project. Now, in conclusion, we have discussed around like learnable algorithms, right? So learnable algorithms need data, and data is a function of your accuracy and error. What kind of accuracy you want will decide the amount of data you need. So lack of data basically leads to overfitting. That is something which you've learned, right? And then paucity of data, like overfitting solutions. So, I mean, we can have functional approaches as we discussed, like dropouts could be there, batch normalization could be there. We can also basically use like your transfer learning, right? So pre-training, where your entire network and weights or only weights can be really transferred to a different domain, right? So which is basically transfer learning. So there is a subtle difference between like your deep, your transfer learning and pre-training, right? So then warping alludes to the fact that like you're maintaining labels of the images and applying transformation. So geometric transformation, color transformation, kernel filters and all, neural style transfer. So these kind of things you can basically use to augment your data. Then you have oversampling, which constitutes like approaches which cater to synthetic data creation, where feature space augmentation and mixing of images. And GANs. Hybrid approach, so nothing really stops us in basically making like a couple of approaches. Like you can have GANs, you can have geometric transformations working in tandem to each other, like parallelly on a specific like data set to enhance the overall quality of the data set for like training purpose. So then we basically discussed around what are the approaches which we can take for optimizing your data training process when the constraints when we are constrained by your devices. So the approaches range right from your hardware to your algorithms. So that was about like data augmentation related to deep learning networks. We will also basically focus a bit, like rather touch upon low shot learning, the future work in data augmentation. So low shot learning is applicable to scenarios like say your autonomous driving where like a camera might really encounter objects which it has never really seen, which it hasn't really been trained on. So low shot learning is primarily to fill in for the objects which have never really been encountered, and the classification is done based on the gaps between the classes. Data distillation is a process like where you have your data as a fixed, I would say like it's a fixed model. The data set is fixed, right? And you are distilling that data. So you are basically bringing, abstracting data and the most significant features of that data, and you're bringing down the volumes for training. Say, for example, for CIFAR, data distillation approach has brought down the requirement of 60,000 images to approximately 20 images. So we do have some references in the reference section over here, right? And besides that, like that was about like just like scratching the surface of data augmentation today with you guys. So I'm more than happy to basically deliver this like specific talk to you folks, right? And do let me know in case if you have any questions. Thanks a lot for your patience. Do let me know about your feedback also. More than happy to basically discuss, like take the ideas forward and have some questions. Thank you.